On today's episode of the Unveil podcast, there is a special treat for anyone who is interested in human design. I'm not going to lie, this is a long episode and it's a deep episode, and we go really granular on Brace's human design. Now, for those of you who listened to our epic Human Design and Gene Keys podcasts earlier in the year, you will know that human design is something that is very familiar to me and something where I really excel as a unique expert in the space. This is an opportunity to understand what it's like to have a full reading with me. We decided to do this because it's really common to have human design readers, but it's not common to get a reading like I do them. So be prepared for deep insights, very personal things for Brace, but you'll hear how he is literally moving through understanding himself more deeply with everything that I share with him about his own design. There's also a lot of general theory, a lot of great support if you're a manifestor, especially an emotional manifestor. I talk all about you. And I really hope you enjoy this episode. And if you're interested in booking a deep dive with me, go to links.page/Victoria and you will be able to do just that. For those of you listening, this is kind of a visual podcast, so you may be better heading to YouTube this week, but check the show notes. There will be a picture of Brace's design so you can support your understanding of everything I'm talking about during this episode. Enjoy. And like I say, I'd love to do a deep dive with you. They are going away in September of this year, so get in quickly if you'd like to experience one of these readings for yourself.
Hello, everyone. Welcome yet again to another beautiful Unveil podcast. My name is Brace Harris.
And my name is Victoria Fenton.
And we are
Unveil.
Very good. Well, today is a very exciting day for me, especially because this is something that I'm still new at, still learning about from Victoria. Today, Victoria is going to give me my own personalized human design in-depth reading, which is very special and unique because she only does this for certain clients and has this service available to people, and yet doesn't have a whole lot of time to do it. So if you're fortunate enough to actually be able to book Victoria for in-depth human design reading, one, I would suggest get on it ASAP because her calendar fills up so quickly. And it's a really unique, special, amazing service that can help one move through their life much more efficiently. And I didn't do any of that justice.
It's so funny as well, though, because like one of our friends, our colleagues, sent me a message after he'd had dinner with you and another one of our colleagues and said, I really clearly need this human design reading thing. Can you do it? Though I know you're the busiest woman on the planet. So I think
that's right.
There's this, yeah. So we call these a deep dive. So they're in our bio and they'll be in the show notes as an Alethea deep dive because these now fall under kind of the Alethea group stuff. But these will be disappearing probably in September for a good long while, simply because I'm creating a whole curriculum. So we just had our little catch up and this is all out of sequence now, guys. We are very, very far ahead in our podcast recording schedule, but we're recording this on the 5th of July, so the day after the 4th of July weekend. And Brace was like, what did you do this weekend? I'm like, I don't know, like created 6 modules of content for the course. So yeah. But the reason that I do things a little bit differently within human design and the bridge between human design and gene keys is simply because of when and how I was trained. So I trained with Ra Uru Hu, who is the founder. He brought human design into the world. And he started doing courses the year before I joined. So I was the second ever cohort of students through all of the foundational training, all of the deeper analysis, the 3-year courses in psychology and the 3-year course in primary health system. We have every single thing that I think Ra ever said and was recorded, we've got a copy of somewhere, including the strangest courses, the dream rave. There's a whole this chart that happens when you sleep, to pet designs, to everything. I was immersed in it for about 7 years. And during all of that time, I was also immersed in the Gene Keys community with Richard Rudd, because the two systems talk to one another. They come from the same data. So I spent a long time just living with this, and also have a knack for it. Like there's an undeniable way my intuition works with these charts that I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it's just having lived around it for a long time. I just seem to see things in these charts that are so obvious to me. But the biggest bit of feedback that I get from whenever I do a deep dive with someone is, you just blew my mind, is number one. Like I take bets in my own head of like, it's like my human design reading bingo. It's like, how many things can I tick off? So you blew my mind, or, oh my God, that's so accurate. Or my favorite was, do you actually have cameras in my house and are you spying on me? So to lay the groundwork, human design isn't soothsaying. It's not fortune telling. It's not really like, I mean, you can read it a little like astrology, where you can get a sense of the themes for the year ahead or the themes for the chapter ahead. But human design, for those who haven't listened to our, hour and a half epic on human design, which is a few episodes back, which we'll link, well, quite a few episodes back now, which we will link to. Human design is essentially about who you were born to be and how you were born to have strengths and weaknesses, things that you're good at and strong in, and things that you're not so great at. And it reorients you to that definition, is what we will call it. And I will do my best to, one, make this listenable rather than you have to actually be looking at Brace's chart as we go through it, but also to explain all the basics a little bit so that you get a sense of what is in a human design chart. But I don't do foundation readings like anyone else does foundation readings. The reason for that is because I like people to feel empowered at the end of a reading, rather than just like, oh, I've got 3 bits of information and that's what I'm going to stick to. So I tend to get very deep and very confusing, which is why I record these for people. But I've been told that it's an experience to have me just read someone's human design. So, yes. And I've never really done Brace's chart. Despite all of our conversations about it, we've never actually done it. Simply because I kind of gave Brace a human design overview in one of our very early conversations in kind of, I don't know, April of last year. And then didn't really talk about it again. And then we've spoken about it a few times, but not really from a full human design deep dive perspective.
Yes. So I am very excited. From what I have been able to glean from our conversations, there's so much that I have been able to apply to my life. And it's interesting because a lot of the things that I am now applying to my life are not things that I have done consistently throughout my life. Some of the strategies, or actually that my more natural ways of being, were kind of taught out of me as I grew up, and what is supposed to be right, and this is how everything is done. And so implementing these more natural strategies sometimes proves to be a little bit difficult, but when I can pull it off, it's almost like, and I'm trying to describe this for people, and I'm not doing a very good job, but it's almost like it's too easy. It's like there's a part of me that's waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like, why was this so easy when it's always been a struggle my life? It's because I wasn't following my design. I was actually doing the opposite of how I naturally am. And human design helps me understand how I move through the world better and easier, and how I can start to see old patterns and old ways of being that no longer serve, which we kind of come back to. So human design, for all our, lovely listeners, is such a great tool in navigating life. It just helps you see a little bit differently. It gives you this perspective And the perspective that it teaches you is actually the best and easiest way that you see the world and how you move through the world. Like I've found that I've been driving my car with a muddy windshield, and Human Design is some amazing windshield wipers that wipe all that stuff away where I can see better. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. I'm very excited for today. Victoria is amazing at this, and she's done so many, and there's always been, just like she was saying, incredible feedback. People get their hair blown back. So yes, I'm excited. I'll shut up now.
Well, and it's interesting as well because it's very slightly according to type, and we'll explain type in a minute, but most people will receive their human design reading, a good human design reading, and it should all resonate. It should be like, oh, really, I can just do that and that's okay. It's very much a giant permission slip for you to make your life easy and to do it the way that you instinctively are drawn to. But typically the world, you said taught it out of you. I, in my head, was like, beat it out of you.
Oh yeah, yes.
It was just like, because the world does, and the world is built for there being one way of being. This is the reason why I want a human design pillar in our training, and there is a human design. I don't just want it, I'm creating it, simply because, and it's actually not just to teach coaches how to give human design to their clients or to empower their like homework giving and all that kind of stuff through the human design lens. It's more so the coaches know how they can coach more effectively, because if you're using your type as I'm better when I'm responding, or I'm better when I'm informing, it literally tells you how to coach, because there's a lot of kind of, you should coach by either only asking questions, or you should not ever lead the witness kind of thing with coaching. And it's like, well, that is really dependent on your type. And so this to me is fascinating information, because it really allows us to understand how we navigate through the world. And therefore, whatever we're doing in whatever course of life we're living, how can I use this skill set to ease my flow, essentially? So,
Love it.
Yeah. So for listeners, I hope that I'm able to render a picture of Brace's chart into the show notes. And I'm going to do my best to make this as obvious as possible without pointing at it. For YouTube people, I'm going to share a screen and you're going to have a picture to look at. I'm going to give it a little bit of the basics. I'm going to pretend Brace knows absolutely nothing and give it to Brace as if he was meeting human design for the first time, which should be interesting. So cool. Now, for anyone on YouTube, you will just see that I've shared a picture. This is the program that I use, and it's lovely because things highlight and like shine, and like I can change all the views. But I'm going to try and do this as unvisually as possible, like I said. The annoying thing about Zoom, on which we are recording this, is that everything is always in the way. So let me just move a few bits out the way so I can actually, there we go. Okay, so what we are looking at in human design is a chart called a body graph. People are a bit surprised when they see this body graph because, one, it looks like a human being, but it's got weird centers in. Two, we will have asked people for their date, time, and place of birth. So people are already in the fix of like, oh, this is like astrology. So they expect to see a wheel and lots of planets and it to be like an astrological chart. Human design uses certain bits of information that are similar to astrology, but it's a very different application of that information. Human design takes the placement of the planets at the time that you were born. And that is all the stuff that gets rendered in black on your human design chart within the gates, which I'll come on to in a second. But it also takes a second data set from about 3 months before you were born. The reason for that is not well explained in anywhere, but it's around what we call the ephemeris. So in all of these kind of divination systems, we look at the planetary movement around the sun and also through the heavens, essentially. So it's the celestial movement of planets. And it's based on a wheel function. And this moment is 3 months or 88 degrees on a kind of protractor degrees prior to the date and time of birth on that wheel. This program I love because I can show you that wheel. So anyone who's now on the YouTube can see that there's a wheel that's appeared around Brace's body graph, which is the central human being looking thing. And you will see around the edges is all the planets that are kind of sitting in certain what we call gates. And that's the difference. So within astrology, you've got houses, there's 12 houses. They're actually on this little wheel that I'm showing the YouTube viewers, but we don't really look at them. We don't really pay any attention to what they mean. They're just there as a reference point for anyone who does have the astrological lens. What we pay more attention to are the numbers that in this little mandala go around the outside of that. And there are 64 of those numbers. These are the 64 gates of the ancient I Ching. Now, the ancient I Ching has kind of fallen into being this weird divination tool where people can use sticks and pick a number and, you know, it's supposed to say something. It's also impenetrable in terms of language. It doesn't make any sense. It's a bit like having a fortune cookie that's a Zen koan and you have to work it out. What Ra did, and, you know, he had received a transmission, as so many of these things are, but he came out of a cave in Ibiza, which is a whole separate story, with all of the 64 gates of the ancient I Ching updated. And so he called it the Rave I Ching. There's a lot of rave terminology in this. And essentially it's a translation and a modernization. But the thing to understand about these 64 gates, 64 hexagrams of the ancient I Ching, and again, this chart has all of the hexagrams around the outside. The thing to grasp is that every time you're looking at this map of 64, whether it's the ancient Chinese I Ching, the Rave I Ching, or gene keys, which there are 64 gene keys, and it's the next iteration, if you like, a kind of a different sense of these 64, they are 64 archetypal energies of humanity and consciousness. So essentially, they are themes which run through our existence. Within the evolution around the wheel, they're not numerically ordered. It doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It actually, bizarrely, starts at the 42 for no real reason numerically, but the energy of the 42 is evolution. It's the impulse to evolve. So clearly that's the start point of existence, the impulse to evolve. And then it goes on to the third gate, which is difficulty at the beginning. So if you actually read these numbers around the outside, it literally tells the story of an evolving consciousness, which is fascinating. Honestly, people can make an entire life study of the I Ching, the hexagrams, this whole world. And just to touch on hexagrams, because we will come back to it, hexagrams are literally a 6-line structure that exists within every single one of these human design gates. So what was a ancient Chinese I Ching hexagram becomes a human design gate, and then ultimately a gene key. So it's a key in gene keys terminology. It's the same information. There's a lot of confusion out there that people are like, oh, gene keys is different too. It's not. It's the same information. It's just a different transmission of it. So when we're looking at, and I don't normally give that much preamble, I'm just trying to explain a lot for people who are listening, but when we're looking at a human design chart, we have a set of numbers down the right-hand side, which is the place where the planets were, the gate where the planets were at the time of birth. And we have a set of numbers down the left-hand side, which is red, and they're where the gates were around 88 degrees of the wheel, 3 months approximately prior to birth. Those bigger numbers have tiny little numbers to the side of them. Those are the lines of the hexagram, because if you imagine, all we're doing is dividing the skies. And so all of these planets move one line at a time. So line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in one gate, and then onto the next gate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, onto the next gate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Has all of that made sense thus far, Brace?
So each gate has 6 kind of
subdivisions.
Yes. Okay.
Exactly. Perfect. That. And we refer to them as lines, and they have themes. So if you imagine, if the bigger themes of the 64 all have 6 subdivisions within them, and they're all very similar. So 1 is the foundations, 2 is natural talent, 3 is trial and error, 4 is networking, 5 is telling everyone about it, and 6 is kind of off the top of the whole theme, looking to the next theme. It's like, what's next? And so every time you're looking at this type of information, whatever gate you're looking at, whatever number you're looking at, first lines will be foundational, second lines will be natural, third lines will be a bit trial and error and tricky, fourth lines will be about friends and networking, fifth lines will be about telling loads of people about it, and sixth lines will be kind of the role model of it and also looking to what's next. And that becomes relevant later in a way that I talk to people about what we call profile, but we'll come on to that. So if we remove all the idea of where all that stuff comes from, and a lot of the stuff that I've just said is not explained to people, and I don't enjoy not explaining where this comes from, because otherwise you're just looking at numbers and it's like, really? Well, it doesn't make any sense. So this is literally where planets were sitting at the time of your birth. Now, those data sets get laid into a picture that's rendered as a human body. It's literally got a head, which has 9 different centers. Centers meaning little shapes over the body graph, which is what we call it, which mean different things. They have different themes. It's a little bit chakra system. It's a little bit Kabbalah system. It's not really either of those things, but people like to resonate with it. As somebody said to me on Saturday, do these map to the human body? And it's kind of like, no, they don't, because the solar plexus is off to the left-hand side, which is technically where the liver is almost. It's not really where the solar plexus chakra would be, but they're energy centers. So they're centers of strength. And what happens is each of those centers has numbers in them of the gates. All of the numbers in everyone's chart are always in the same place because they fall in line with the themes. The archetypal themes within the gate match the energy of the center. So in the ego, for example, all of these gates are to do with power, basically, and different types of power. Same thing in the G center, which is a central diamond in the middle. It's all about direction and love, and all the gates are about that as well. But what happens is if you've got a planet sitting in the gate, it changes the energy and it colors that energy, and that gets colored in your chart. And each gate has a gate on the other side of it, and 2 gates colored in by 2 different planets create a channel. And if a channel is created, we color in the centers on either side of that channel. So gates meet gates to make a channel and color in the centers. And what we're looking at when anything's colored in within a human design chart is what we call definition. And that definition is where you have consistent energy. It's where you're strong. It's how you are in the world and how you show up. And everything that's white is the things that you're open to from the world around you. And what we mean by open to is this is all about auras and chemistry. So effectively what human design is saying is this is the nature of how your aura shows up and how it resonates. Therefore, this is how you will resonate with the world around you. And what you will pick up from other people's auras is everything that's white within a human design chart. And this is the common thing that people miss within human design. They're looking at all the definitions and the strength and the planets and the everything, and they miss the white stuff, which is way more. And the white stuff is not just about open centers and like being defined by other people. You can look at key people who will be very significant in your life because they will join you up, they will bridge certain things, they will give you certain experiences, and those people tend to exist in your life. Like I've never done a human design chart and mentioned a significant gate that they have missing, but that does something significant for them. They always have someone in their life who does that, and they recognize that relationship is really important. So it's a very interesting way of looking at all of this relating. It's essentially, how do you resonate with the world around you? The simplest way of explaining what human design allows you to do is it gives you a decision-making strategy. And the reason it gives you a decision-making strategy is because if you think about the nature of a decision is, do I want to do this thing with the outside world? Do I want to eat this food, go to this place, have this relationship? It's like, how am I interacting with the outside world? That's literally the nature of a decision. And if you know how your aura is built to interact with the world around you, that tells you how to make a decision, which is about interacting with the world around you. Still making sense, Bryce?
Yes. So just so I'm clear. So anything that is colored in, any of the centers that are colored in, excuse me, is something that I naturally have within me. Is as a strength, and anything that's opened is not necessarily a weakness, but it's where other people in my orbit get to come in, and I have access to them. If that's a filled in center for them, if that's a strength for them, I can almost pull from that strength.
Yes, and you get colored by it. So you will be influenced by it. And this is the whole thing with human design. We're obsessed with our openness energetically. So we want to be filled in the areas where we're not colored in. Everyone gets
Right.
design envy. I have never done a human design reading where someone hasn't gone, oh, I wish I had fill in the blank. Literally fill in the blank. And there's always this sense that, oh, it would be easier if I was this way or that way. The reason we feel that is because we feel very powerfully the stuff that we don't have. And if we're around it a lot, we start to think it's ours, and then it disappears and it's not ours anymore. And we don't have access to that energy center, because all of these have energy around them. So essentially it's about, you have these strengths, which are so innate, which is why human design should feel very resonant. They're so innate that nothing I say should be surprising. You should just go, oh yeah, I know that about myself. But it's the openness where we feel pulled to be something that we're not. And it's typically about showing up in the universe in a way that we don't need to worry about. We call them not self strategies. There's a lot of jargon in human design. There's a lot of terminology. And essentially we have self and not self. So self is operating from your own innate or auric strengths, and not self is feeling the call and the pull of the strategies of the open centers. So yeah, there's a lot of difficult terminology that people don't love, but the essence of it is auric. And that's the thing that people miss, and people like human design readers don't do a good enough job of explaining, because that's why this is a decision-making strategy. It's also why it is powerful to understand from the perspective of how you interface with everyone else around you. And the way the aura is determined is by which centers are colored in. So if you have certain definitions, it makes you a specific type, and the type is what has a specific aura about it. And there are 4 types in human design. Each one has a different feel, and people who are empaths and highly sensitive people can sense this. You can feel the aura of another person, and each type has a very distinct aura, and it determines how they interface with the world around them. And I'm going to keep this still a bit general, because I am going to tell you the 4 types, but then I'm going to segue into just giving Brace a reading where it's very specific to him. But essentially, the 4 types, there are generators, which make up the majority of humanity, together with manifesting generators, which is a subtype, which I'll come on to in a second. They make up a good almost 2/3 of society. It's huge. Generators have to have what is known as the sacral center colored in. The sacral center, if you're not looking at this, is the center just up from the bottom square. It's the square that has the most gates attached to it. It is literally a generator. It is a motor. It is a powerful, constant motor of activity and energy. The reason it's the majority of humanity is because it's so easy to hook it up, because so many planets because there's so many gates and so many access points. Generators are here to work. They are here to build. They are literally the people who can work 9 to 5, have that consistent energy, and have a natural flow of energy through the day where it's wake up, work, go to sleep. It's kind of like the most innate thing. And this is why when it comes to what you were saying earlier about having the strategies taught out of you,
right?
The world thinks that everyone should be generators. Like everyone should have 9 to 5 jobs. Everyone should have consistent energy. If you don't, you've got a health problem, not you just aren't built like that. And generators are very good at thinking that everyone should behave the way they do. But because generators have...
Why did you laugh?
Well, because I'm a generator. So it's like, people, keep up.
I love it.
So generators really have that capacity to work. So the fundamental strategy for someone with a generator aura, which is very, powerful, but very, well, and also, depends how defined you are and everything else, but the sacral is consistent energy capacity, but you have to be doing something that you want to put that towards. So the whole strategy for a generator is to respond. Essentially, it's not about initiating, because if you initiate, you've just mentally gone, oh, I have this motor of energy. I'm going to put it over here because I want to. And that's very common for generators to feel like it's what they should do, but it actually ends up them being in the wrong place a lot of the time, because the whole essence of human design is that everything that's open Your mind, cognitive mind, not human design mind, but bear in mind, but this like mind chimp that you have inside you obsesses about the openness. So if you're going to mentally make a decision as a generator, you will make a decision to move towards your openness and be in a place which isn't energetically resonant for you. Everything that generators do is about responding to the environment around them. And literally, you have to be in resonance to it. Otherwise, it feels deeply uncomfortable. So if you're a generator and you're feeling deeply uncomfortable in your life, the likelihood is you didn't respond to being there. Now, response can be vibrational. Like I explained this, like I'm in the shower and I have 2 different types of shampoo, and whatever my energy naturally moves towards for that morning is the shampoo that I use. I have, 4 different types of tonic in my fridge, 4 different flavors. And I don't make a mental decision. I just go there and I respond physiologically to the stimulation in front of me. And every generator who's listening will get this. Grocery stores, like why that cauliflower? Generator response. That's the resonant frequency with the world around you that brings you into contact with, that's the thing that I want, that's the decision. That's generators. Manifesting generators are a type of generator. And manifesting generators, and Brace knows that he's smiling slightly because I have a bee in my bonnet because I'm a purist when it comes to human design. Manifesting generators are not a separate type. Their strategy is still to respond. They have to respond. Manifesting generators have manifesting energy as well. And actually, it's really tricky for them because they tend to think that they need to manifest things, as in initiate. And they end up initiating a lot of stuff, but they don't have the motor to follow through with all the stuff they initiate. So in order for manifesting generators to truly be in the right place, they still need to respond. They can't just keep initiating. So that's manifesting generators. Manifestors themselves, and we're going to talk a lot about manifestors today because Brace is a manifestor. Manifestors have the capacity to initiate. They should initiate. In fact, they absolutely have to. It's the only way they can work. Manifestors have to be lit up by what they're initiating. They have to be inspired to initiate the thing, but they can't wait to respond to the world around them. It's the key for manifestors. It's like you're not waiting to respond. And your life shouldn't be a response to the world around you. That's generators. And you're not here to make responses to the world around you. You are here to just initiate and be different. It's a nasty term, but we say that manifestors have a repellent aura. All that means is it's really powerful to be around a manifestor because they just have the capacity to do. So it's very difficult to be around a manifestor if they're not following their strategy, which is informing. It's tough for manifestors because you don't have just wait and respond, or wait for the invitation, or wait for the cycle of the moon, which are the other 2 types. You absolutely have to do things, and your strategy isn't really about decisions. It's about making sure that everyone's okay with your decisions. And so giving chart readings to manifestors is always quite challenging because they want me to tell them how to make decisions. And I'm like, you just have to follow that impulse that you have from your authority and tell everyone. I'm just gonna park that because I just want to mention the other 2 types, and then I'm going to come back and give you a proper human design reading, Grace. Projectors have a very penetrating aura. They can really get into people. They don't have a consistent center of energy source, and they can be a little bit uncomfortable to be around if they're like seeing everything that they can see in you. Their strategy is to wait for the invitation. The reason being, if they just share with you what they see, it's very uncomfortable to be on the receiving end of. But if you say to them, why don't you tell me what you think? That's an open invitation for them to give of their opinion. Projectors find it difficult to wait for the invitation because like, what constitutes an invitation? And it's like, you don't need to wait for it to be formally like signed. And we said this in our original podcast. It's like, you're not waiting for like a stamped addressed envelope and like, it's not the thing. You are essentially waiting to feel like someone has said, I want you, in whatever sense. The invitation to dinner, it's not, maybe we should potentially go here, which is a very generator response thing. It's like, no, thank you. Projectors, literally, you're waiting for somebody to recognize you and say, I want you, because you really need that validation of recognition. Reflectors have no centers colored in. This is the 4th type. They are very unique beings. And they have what is known as a Teflon aura, which is very dated now, but it's essentially they're non-stick. Things don't necessarily influence them if they're living according to their strategy and authority, which is lots of time away from people, lots of space, and lots of time to make decisions, just because you need to really feel through all of your definitions. And you'll do that as the planets continue to move around the ephemeris every single day. They will fill you in. So a lot of the reflector terminology is about waiting for the cycle of the moon, because the moon moves around that whole wheel within the course of a month. So it's quicker. It's the quickest planet.
So wait, so they would have to wait a month before making like big decisions?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Right. Reflectors tend to find that they have seasons in their life, particularly because the outer planets move super slowly. And if they've got an outer planet that's hooking up one of their gates and giving them definitions, they will have a season of being emotional. They'll have a season of being splenic. They'll have a season of having really cognitive weight. But the moon, because it moves so quickly, it can basically give them a sampling flavor of how they actually feel about things. So for big decisions, where to move, who to marry, you need to follow those cycles of the moon and probably wait until there's not kind of a significant definition.
And I can't remember, have you ever met a reflector before or read one?
I know of reflectors. So I've never actually been in the auric presence of a reflector knowingly. I'm sure I have unknowingly, because believe it or not, I don't just say to everyone, before you can be in my space, I need your birth data. But I do know of them, and they're very soft spoken, very floaty, a lot of reflectors I probably have met, not self-reflectors. Not self-reflectors can be very weighed down by the cosmos, the state of humanity, the pressures of the world, because they just are so, they're not sensitive. It's not correct to say they're sensitive, because they do have this, like, things brush off them, but they don't know what's theirs. They spend so much time being surrounded by other energy that they're like, oh my God, do I need to process all of this? Is this mine? Do I need to, because you're picking up stuff all the time in your openness. And if you imagine somebody who's totally open, they're just like, is this mine? What do I do with this? So that's kind of reflector stuff. Sensitivity, just to speak to that slightly, sensitivity is not determined by type necessarily. So you can have highly sensitive manifestors, you can have highly sensitive projectors, you can have super sensitive generators, myself included. Sensitivity is found in deeper layers of analysis, and also certain centers, certain gates, certain attunements. And also sometimes it's just not to do with design at all. But yeah, so just to speak to that. So with all of that said, Brace.
Yes.
You're a manifestor.
Yes, I am.
You are. Manifestors have no consistent energy. Despite having a very powerful capacity to initiate, they don't have consistent energy. It doesn't mean they've got no energy. It just means it's not consistent. And it's not, constant work. Manifestors shouldn't be constantly involved in work. Manifestors also aren't here to necessarily build the foundations of things. They're here to see what needs doing and to just get on and do it. Manifestors, to be a manifestor, you have to have what we call a motor to throat connection. These centers, and everyone says, do the colors mean anything? They do, but it's not worth even worrying about. If they're colored in, they're always the same color. It doesn't change depending on definitions or whatever. Effectively, certain centers can be classed as motors. And to be a manifestor, you have to have a motor connected to the throat. Pure manifestors have, we'll not go there. It's a layer of too much detail. Victoria pulls herself back. Your motor to throat connection is actually this little branch here. So you've got a root to spleen to throat connection. Now, for everyone listening, the root center is at the root. The spleen is on the left-hand side as you're looking at a chart, which confuses me because my spleen's on my... but it matches. It's just not medically accurate. So the spleen, and then the spleen to the throat, and the throat is where a throat would be. It's right in the throat area. The root center is all about pressure. It's a root pressure. It's not pressure from a constancy perspective, but it is a lot to do with deadlines, the pressure to get things done. The spleen is all to do with health and well-being and safety. It's a fear safety center. And the throat is all to do with expression and action, so doingness. Hence, doingness being a manifestor thing, throats have to be defined and have power from a motor to go directly to the throat. It's literally what makes you a manifestor.
So so with my particular chart, root to spleen to throat.
Yes.
So does the root influence the spleen and the throat, or how does?
It's an interesting question. Because the way to analyze someone's chart is by center, but what's actually happening is that when you're initiating, you're using all of this that's colored in to initiate something. So when you initiate, you're initiating through, and I'll talk about your channels in a second, but you're basically saying, this is where I want to put my power right now. This is what's right. And this is how it feels emotionally, because Brace also has an emotional and an ego definition. So this is why I like to do complicated, complex human design readings, because all of this is resonating at once. There's no separation. There's no, when I'm manifesting, I'm using this bit. When I'm this bit separate, it's like when you are manifesting, you manifest. And this is where Victoria goes a bit crazy. And I'll explain where all of this comes from. But you manifest about correcting authority intuitively in the now to preserve the family and the tribe. Now, the reason Brace manifests in that way, and the YouTube viewers will have seen it, is because those are your 3 channels. Brace has 3 channels in his chart, and only 3. They are doubly defined in some areas, but he has 3 channels which link him up. He has this emotion and ego connection, definition. It's actually split off from the rest of his design, which we'll talk about in a second. But essentially, when you initiate, you are initiating to correct authority in the now with your intuition all around a part seeking a whole, actually tribal family orientation. That's what you initiate and how you initiate. And whenever you're initiating, it will bear those things in mind. Now, for people listening, the channels that Brace has are the 1858. That is correcting authority. It's the impetus to correct, like, people in power. The 5720, which is all about intuition in the now. It's like, this is perfect right now. 20 is very much the gate of the now. And the 4037 is the channel of design of a part seeking of whole. So it's a family oriented, belonging tribal channel. It's actually a tribal circuit. I know there's a bit of complication about us using the word tribe these days, but human design was like the 80s. So tribal definition, and tribal meaning that familial connection of what is safe for communities, etc. Now, the whole thing about this is Brace has what we call a channel of penetrating awareness. That's the 5720. It's that intuition in the now. Penetrating meaning it bursts through. There is a lot about this which I'm just trying to skew my direction of giving it, because I'm very conscious that we have listeners, but how I would give it to you, Brace, is this is a channel which will mean you will wake up in the morning with thoughts. It will be like, as you wake up in the morning, there will be thoughts in your head, which seem to have come from nowhere, because the 20th, I mentioned the dream rave before, the 20th gate is a big part of the dream rave, and it's constant in your design. Therefore, you will wake up almost with earworms, potentially music, potentially phrases that you're like, oh, that resonates somewhere. It's an interrupting, penetrating awareness that wakes you up. Yes. But also that can happen during the day. So it's like that insight when you see something in a coaching client, in the world, it's like it will wake you up and penetrate your awareness with that insight, that shocking insight.
Yes, for me, and to let everyone know how that completely resonates, and I understand that. And I've told these things to Victoria, but I want to tell everyone as well, especially the morning thing. Everybody knows that place where you're still asleep, but you're a little bit awake at the same time, like that little space in between being fully awake or fully asleep. I will have very clear understandings all of a sudden that will come through. It'll just be literally what you said. They penetrate and it's like, oh, now it makes sense. Or right. I'll have an insight or a thought about something that I've kind of been contemplating. And all of a sudden the answer will come through in that little gap between sleep and awake in the morning time, especially. Yeah. That will come through. So that completely makes sense to me. Or I will be almost daydreaming a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you touched on daydreaming in one of our previous podcasts. I don't think that one has come out yet, but daydreaming is like a dream, almost like a dream state. So it's basically kind of the same thing in between the sleep and awake. Mm-hmm. And I would just have an insight or an inspiration or this just big tidal wave of creative will come through in those moments. So that completely makes sense to me.
And the trick for you is not to follow those. And the reason why is because you have this emotional definition. Now, emotional center, it's the center on the right-hand side of the chart. That's the little sideways triangle. It's the solar plexus, and it is the center of emotions. About 50% of the planet have this defined, and about 50% have it undefined. When this is defined, it means you have a consistent emotional wave. That doesn't mean you're always at the same emotional temperature. In fact, it literally determines that your emotional temperature has a fluctuating capacity over time, peaks and troughs of emotions, ups and downs that are not related to external circumstances at all. It will literally almost be the emotional temperature is how I describe it, the emotional temperature of what you're moving through at any one moment in time. Everyone, now Brace has the spleen center, which we've been speaking about in that intuition, instinct, what's safe, what's right. That's the splenic intuition. It's very instant and it's very in the now, especially when you combine it with this 20th gate, which is very an in the moment interruption. But the emotional center slows everything down. And it says your insight in the now is true in this now. But with an emotional wave, you have a fluctuating function of emotionality, which means that you need to, what we call ride the wave, to understand whether that inspiration in the now is still what you want to initiate on the other end of the wave. Okay. And this is the biggest problem for manifestors with instinct and emotions. The instincts are correct for every now, but you need to sample that now at every point in the emotional wave to understand what to initiate. So manifestors with this type of chart where they have the spleen and they have the solar plexus, it's very much about not committing to anything and saying you can do something when you have an inspirational thought and saying, yes, I'm going to do this, because that's you informing that you are going to do something. You need to absolutely ride out that emotional wave to understand whether, yeah, you can see it. Yeah, you can initiate. Do you actually want to initiate when you're low on your wave and when you're high on your wave? Do you still want to be doing that thing? So that's the challenge for anyone with a solar plexus defined, actually. It's like you need to slow down. You absolutely need to take your time to make decisions, because what you're saying, particularly for generators, actually, where you're going to put that workhorse, powerhouse energy into something, you are saying that you can put that energy into it at every single moment of your wave. And if you're getting that feed when you're, that instinct, when you're high on your wave, because you're up and energy and positive and yay, it's like, okay, but can you still contribute that energy to it when you're at a low ebb of your wave? Particularly with this chart. Now, the 1858 is collective, the 4037 is tribal, but this 5720 is individual. Those are three different circuits. And the circuitry is so important because it's basically to do with where you're pointing your energy. And this 5720, it's individual, and individual is very on or off. The individual circuitry is kind of in the middle of all of this. It's very difficult to see in a human design chart without actually coloring it all in. But the individual circuitry operates on a pulse function. So it's very on or it's totally off. And in the off, there can be quite a lot of depression and melancholy and really low feeling, coupled with the low emotional wave. It's like you have to be able to do the thing at that point. Not so much for a manifestor, actually, because you can just go, I'm not doing it now, I'm going over here. And you genuinely can just initiate whatever the hell you want. But for longer term things, you really need to be bought into the whole wave function of it, to make sure that what you initiate, you're actually wanting to do from a place of kind of emotional reflection.
Okay, so when I get those bursts of inspiration, slow down and make sure, like, ride the emotional wave to make sure that that is the correct decision. It depends what it is. At all points.
If it's a decision, yes. If it's like, oh my God, I should do X, wait. If it's, this is a really great idea, literally inform someone. The whole thing about manifestors, I said this in an Instagram comment to someone the other day who just put on something about manifesting. I was like, overshare. Like what you think is sharing is not enough information for anyone else around you. You're informing because so much of a manifestor life goes on inside you of inspiration and initiation and things that you think you're going to do and things that you know you're going to do, but you don't ever tell anyone about it. So we have no idea what the hell is going on. So oversharing about your life, your world, your decisions, your thoughts, your everything is the key for manifestors. It's literally tell us everything. And the interesting thing for manifestors is that they start that way, but the person that they tell, the people that they tell, tends to be their parents, and they will do it with all of their exuberant energy of like, oh my God, this happened today, and this happened, and I want to do this, and what about this? And parents go, oh, please be quiet, I don't have time right now. So very quickly, the manifestor learns that nobody cares. And that's not true. Everyone cares from an adult's perspective. And also parents of manifestors can be taught to actually really validate that informing, because the common thing with manifestors is that they have so much energy that they just go off and do something, but parents get scared. It's like, oh my God, don't do that, little Johnny. And when manifestors are told enough, don't do that, don't say that, particularly because it's a throat thing. So it's very vocal, there's a lot of action. So it's movement and it's talking, and it can be very high octane. And parents literally just go, shut up, please be quiet. And all the manifestors listening will understand and will have heard this narrative. And in later life, everyone around them would really benefit from them saying, I know we need to go to the store, I'm going to do it after work, and I will get gas and I will do this thing, because you're literally telling us what you're going to do rather than it all being locked in your head. Because the reality of what happens with manifestors is they don't tell anyone, and then two people go to the store and they end up with 2 lots of milk or whatever it is. It's like, there's just communicate, because I need to understand what's getting done and what's not in a practical life.
Yes, all of that, especially the stuff from the childhood. That's right. Like so often it was,
and particularly with an emotional
definition
as well.
You're too much. And so you shut that down because it's not accepted. So you're basically shutting down who you are naturally.
Yes.
And
try
I think to be something that you're not.
Yeah.
And then,
with manifestors with a defined emotional process as well, you should tell people how you are feeling. It may sound obvious, but tell people how you are feeling honestly is a part of informing of your whole nature as a manifestor with a defined solar plexus. But so often you don't. And so often manifestors with a defined emotional process internalize and think they have to do it all themselves because nobody cares, because they learned really early on that nobody cared. And it's not that nobody cared, they knew their parents cared, but nobody wanted to hear in granular detail about the emotional landscape of that child, because it was a child's emotional landscape. But learning that pattern then, and then translating that into adulthood, the amount of manifestor or manifesting generator emotional clients who have I'm fine, I'm good. It's I'm pretty convinced that they think they're good at the end of the day, because they've been told not to talk about it enough that they're actually not feeling it. And it's that suppression, we've spoken about this loads, that's literally traumatizing. It's we don't want to hear your process. So ultimately, over time, the manifestor that has a defined solar plexus will stop actually allowing themselves to feel the full spectrum of what they're feeling, because nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody cares. And it's interesting because we have conversations professionally in our business landscape. And I don't look at Brace's chart regularly. In fact, I had to remind myself before this. But there are times when Brace is nobody wants to hear what I've got to say. And it's literally the polar opposite is true.
She's let me reach through the screen and
strangle you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And it very much is this essence of, not everybody wants to hear what you have to say. Absolutely true. But your audience do, not in a professional sense, but the people who are literally here to hear you do want to hear what you have to say, do care. And it isn't necessarily to speak to me, because I won't necessarily resonate with what you've got to say, but you will have people who will. And manifestors tend to have this energy of being able to do anything, and yet somehow they're suffocating that because of their life experience. And that can be very frustrating, especially to people like me, because I'm like, I can feel one of the biggest problems that I have is that I think why I am so good at human design is because I can kind of feel people's truth, but they're so often not being who they are. And it's confused me my whole life. It's like, I can feel this and you're giving me all these vibes. And I'm like, the two don't make sense. So within like Manifesto world, it's like, it really upsets me. I mean, that's a strong word, but it's like, sorry, I can't really say that, but it's just, yeah, no, literally, I'm going to put an explicit warning. It's like, just fucking do something. Just fucking do it. It's kind of the impulse that I get with manifestors. And it's interesting because I don't feel it with manifesting generators. Like my mum is a manifesting generator, emotional. My brother is an emotional manifesting generator. And I don't ever get the just do something vibe with them. In fact, I'm more often saying, please wait a little. Like my mum she spent 2 hours on the phone to John Lewis today. She's clearly angry. And like, she just was like telling me the story. And I'm like, she probably should have had this conversation not on a low of her emotional wave, because she's literally going, am I supposed to go to Aberdeen to return this back? She's just being like a tyrant with her, which is great and perfect. And it's John Lewis and nobody cares. It's customer service. But it's just the funniest thing of like, please wait. And that's the thing. So I'm saying just do something, but do something that's in alignment with having waited out an emotional process. But I think that emotional process can, we can luxuriate in it a little if we're not careful. It's like, okay, now is the moment to do something. And your emotionality for you, it's a very specific way of being defined emotionally. The 4037 is that design of a part seeking a whole. And I love this channel for weird reasons. I've got the 37, I don't have the 40. It's a tribal channel. It's family oriented. It's actually about the family. So again, one of the wonderful things about having the experience that I had is that I did all the weird courses with Ra, including like angels, ghosts, demons, or whatever that one was called, the death states and all that, but also the mystical way. And the mystical way is like, it's inbuilt into our design, our DNA, to seek magic, to seek gods and deities, and also to seek that mystery behind the veil, pun intended, of what's behind creation. And it's all through this channel, actually, the 1949, the 4037, and then on up. And that 4037 is part of it. It's part of this believing that there's a place for us. And when I say that, I mean in every sense of the word. So believing that there's a place for you in community and tribe, believing that there's a place for you as a human in religion and God, like does God exist? And God in any denomination of religion. Doesn't have to be God from a Christian religion. It can be, any kind of deity or just consciousness. It's this openness to where do I fit in like the cosmos of humanity type thing? Where do I fit in my little tribe? Where do I fit in the community in which I find myself? It's like the need to find belonging. And so the emotionality through this is based on this sense of confidence, ego, sense of confidence and willpower and self-esteem that comes from knowing where you belong. And that kind of makes you feel emotionally safe. So people with the 4037 have to find their emotional safety through finding where they belong so that they can feel like they have that self-esteem. And particularly for you as a manifestor, that will come with finding your voice as well. So that is a process of finding your voice to speak to your tribe, to find the place that you belong so that you can feel emotionally secure, even in the waves. It's an emotional security, but it's all to do with safety as well because of the spleen. And it will be a pressure. It's like, root center is interesting. Most people have it colored in. Undefined, it's this sense of pressure to get things done and pressure to get rid of things, get through things so they're over with. A defined root is very much like a consistent sense of time. And people with like defined roots kind of have this consistent sense of time moving, not rushing, just moving. Grace is not saying anything.
Yes. So where do you belong? That really resonates with me because finding where I belong in the tribe, in the community, is something I've always kind of struggled with. Mm-hmm. And I've never fully felt settled in who I am, what I'm doing, where I'm going. And I still feel like I'm searching. So there's always this grain, and it makes sense because I've actually used this as an example. There's always this grain of discontent, of sadness, of feeling like I'm just not quite where I'm supposed to be, and not having found that fully 100% with the utmost confidence, that makes sense why that is always kind of this nagging little part of myself, because I don't feel like I have fully found exactly where I belong and what I'm supposed to do and my purpose and all those things, which, we've talked about on other podcasts as well.
And I think the interesting thing in that, Bryce, is that people can say that. People say, oh, I haven't quite found my place in the tribe yet, or whatever it is.
Right.
Because you have this definition of being a part seeking a whole, it will be a very ingrained felt sense for you that you need to seek that whole. I have the 37, but I don't have the 40. I know I haven't quite found my tribe yet, but it isn't a stress to me particularly. It's not something that lives inside me as this, I'm out of place because I'm not in my place. I have different stuff. For me, it feels like I'm kind of always navigating to it. But the other element here is this open center of the identity as well. So with that open center, essentially it's about not really knowing the right direction, but also being a chameleon that can fit into many different groups. And the 40-37 being so about family, it's very common for people with this kind of layout to keep seeking to belong within their family of origin, but don't really. They're a manifesto, they're a bit weird, they're a bit different, they're a bit, like whatever. I
am the oddball,
right,
in my family. Yeah.
And so you don't have an example of fitting in a family. So you create it. So you create it with your wife and your child on the way. Like that's the family, like nexus of a unit. But with the 40-37, that's not really enough. It's not about marriage. It's much more about tribe, not just nuclear family. Right. So there is the need to find that place, but you can be a chameleon and kind of make everyone else feel comfortable with your place there, but that sense of belonging is a very different element, and that's the interesting thing. And it's because it's there as a definition, it's constant inside you as an energy, like I'm a part seeking a whole.
So since the part seeking the whole is a natural part of who I am, can I ever fully?
Yes. Yeah. So the whole point of this is the purpose of your life. And I'm just reading my Phenomenal Circuitry book. The purpose of your life is to discover where you belong in the grand scheme of things and then to live that out. Instead of trying to figure out where you fit in, wait to see which people or communities invite you in. This is where it gets a little bit confusing because that's invite is very projector language. Some of these are projected channels, which is why they have projected language. You don't need to know that level of detail. But the essence of, because it's part of your definition, it is your purpose and your destiny to find your place in the whole. People just have this idea that it should happen like early on in life. And it doesn't. It takes time because it's part of your evolutionary journey. Literally, it's the mystical way as an evolutionary journey. For you also, just to point out where this comes in, your 40 is your north node of the psychological side, so personality side, and nodes are all about environments. It's on the psychological side, it's about what you see. So you're always going to be seeing this 40th gate. 40th gate is kind of the gate of aloneness. It's like, leave me alone, but it's also needing space alone. But you'll see it's also down here, which is one of the outer planets, and it's doubled here. And that means that this is Saturn. Is it Saturn? No, it's Jupiter. I can always lose it. No, it's Saturn. I was right first time. It's Saturn. So Saturn's a very heavy energy. Saturn is very, Saturn has a lot of mystical natures to it. Isn't Saturn retrograde at the moment or something like that? I didn't have that conversation the other day.
Until October, yeah.
Right. So, because it moves slowly. So, which is why they're both in the same place. So it is a is this kind of king energy within you of this kind of ruler that is like constantly there, and it's what you see all the time. So that's seeking. The 37 is your south node, because these actually form an opposition in the wheel, 40-37. So the 37 is the south node, and the nodes tend to be, again, nodes are not used in astrology, nor is the earth. We have the earth here. Nodes are like how you see. They're nodes of the moon. So it's like what you see and what's immediately outside you. So your lens will also be looking through the 40-37. It's like you see communities and tribes and you see that you want to belong. You see people belonging. You see that people belong there. And it's like you're constantly looking at this as part of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So how do I use that to my advantage?
You just wait. Like, unfortunately, everything to do with the emotional solar plexus stuff is waiting. It's like, you'll find it. Just stop. Like, stop trying. And literally stop trying, because tribal stuff is all like, you will be invited to join. So it's about not trying to force it, but manifesting. So the only way the tribe can invite you in is if you're manifesting over here and doing all of this initiation stuff, so they can actually see you. Manifestors are supposed to be really visible. Manifestors are supposed to literally interrupt people's lives. They're supposed to just interrupt stuff, particularly with this channel, 5720. It's like penetrating awareness, the clues in the name. You're supposed to like shock people. Again, it's not the gate. There is a gate of shock somewhere else, and there's like gates of penetration and all that kind of stuff. But this is about like a penetrating awareness. You're supposed to, and this, when it comes to coaching, this is what I mean about having your human design as a coach is so important, because it's not valuable for Brace as a coach to sit there and ask his clients 49,000 questions in an attempt to get them to the place that he's trying to get them. It's just not the way Brace should coach. He should literally be directive and say, yeah, but what I'm basically seeing is, like, that's the way Brace needs to coach his clients, because he has penetrating awareness. It's frustrating for a manifestor to sit there and let someone navigate and weave their way through to destination. You kind of just need to tell them, like this. And same with manifesting generators as well. There's just the capacity to inform. Like, so if you're sitting there coaching, trying to wait and respond and all that kind of stuff, it's not hardline like this. Obviously, you're responding to what they say. But if you have this penetrating awareness, tell them. And the reason that doesn't require waiting emotionally is because, think of life. You're not going to ride out your emotional wave when you're about to eat food, like a meal. You don't need to like sit and ride out your emotional wave, because the moment that you're deciding what to eat and the moment of eating is contextual. So you're likely to be at a similar point in the wave. So you're not making a decision of what meal am I going to have for the rest of my life. You're making the decision of what meal am I going to have in 20 minutes. So the point you're at the wave is the point that you're going to be eating, so you can make a decision in the moment. But if you're thinking of like, and same with clients, it's like if they're seeing you every week or every 2 weeks or whatever it is, it's like you have to trust that they're supposed to be there at that point in your emotional wave, and you have the awareness and you tell them. Like, that's the magic of coaching containers. People show up at the right time. And you know from coaching people, it's like then people's lives go topsy-turvy because they've decided to be in a coaching container. It's like, that's not us doing it. That's like them going, oh, I'll throw things up in the air. And in that throwing things up in the air, manifestors with penetrating awareness absolutely should penetrate the awareness of their clients by telling them what's up. And that's just details that is useful to know.
Yes. What I like about knowing that is that it's not just for my benefit. It's like me informing is for the other person's benefit as well, because everything is set up where they receive that in a really positive way.
If you inform them, I'm just going to tell you something.
Right.
Like, it's really easy. Like, I just need to tell you this. I just need to tell you what I'm seeing. Not, can I tell you what I'm seeing? That's my question. As a generator coach, I am responding all the time to everything that everyone says. I'm literally a resonating machine that is constantly feeling resonance. So Brace has witnessed me coach. And the most powerful thing I can do is screw up my face in response to what you're saying so that you stop talking, because it makes it super obvious. But I use my whole body as a responding organism, so that I'm constantly responding, so that the client, whatever their type, has something to see and witness and respond against. But if I'm receiving kind of downloads, I always make sure my clients know that they can say no to any question that I ask them. But I will say, can I share something with you? And watch for a fawn response. So I do watch them kind of just try and make me happy because I'm the coach and the authority in the situation. So they'll go, oh yeah, of course. And I watch all of their facial cues to understand whether they really mean yes, or whether it's a kind of cognitive yes, I should say yes. And if I know their design, it helps because I can tell what I'm looking for in terms of a resonant response. And then I can inform them, but not inform in a manifesting way, just like respond to their agreement that I'm going to tell them something. This is what I love about the curriculum that I'm building, because I'm going to train people to do all of this, to watch the facial cues, to understand how to resonate with their clients, to understand their own design, to understand other people's designs, so that I do a lot of this instinctively, but it's instinctively after 2 decades of practice. So you can codify it to begin with, to then get to the place of instinct. So many good coaches do this instinctively. My coach does this instinctively, and I watch him do it because I know his design, and I just laugh at myself. I'm like, yeah, I'll let you just like be you for a second. And it's just that kind of moment of, understanding. And that's a really interesting thing to say, actually, because, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, and I'll ask him and cut it out if he does, but my coach is a generator, which is interesting to me because it's a resonant field, but he's a relatively undefined generator, which means that a lot of people think generators are one thing and manifestors are one thing and like projectors are one thing. I've seen incredibly defined projectors, and everyone thinks projectors are going to be soft and lovely, but projectors can have real strong definition and real strong energy. You are a relatively defined manifester. You've got this open center of the sacral, and the open not self strategy is never knowing when enough is enough. And I'm going to tie that to your profile in a second, because we really must talk about that. So this is never knowing when enough is enough. Never enough work, never enough effort, never enough research, never enough information, never enough education, it's never enough. And then we've spoken about the open identity center, G center here. This is about direction. People who feel like they are directionless, people who don't feel like they necessarily have a trajectory through life. And they're just kind of randomly picking things. People look at my life and go, oh my God, that's so random. I have always felt this through line of trajectory that's been pulling me, because I have a defined G center and a sacral attached to it. So I'm very kind of, oh no, there's a through line. People without this G center can tend to think everything's a bit like haphazard, and where am I really going and what am I really doing?
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, Grace does this in Unveil. It's like, what are we doing now? Like, hang on. I'm like, no, there's complete rationale behind this. There's a through line and it makes sense. And Grace is like, does it? So yeah. And then the open Ajna center combined with like the never enough thing. The Ajna is the mind, and it's the upside down triangle in the head zone of the body graph. It's literally about ways of thinking. So you can think in multiple different ways, many different ways of thinking, often colored by who's around you, but it's about never being certain, like always feeling uncertain. Now, when I look at a chart like this, there's so much uncertainty. There is never being secure in what you know from the Ajna center, never really knowing what direction you're going in from the G center. This is not necessarily not self strategies. It's just, it's not innate within you to have this direction. And then this not self strategy of never really knowing when enough is enough from the sacral center. To me, it's really obvious that someone with this chart, and this isn't me making a personal comment about Bryce, this is just how I would read this chart, would feel very insecure about manifesting because it might threaten their place in the tribe. That's kind of the underlying thematic that I see in this chart. It's like, I don't necessarily want to say what I think and feel, because I don't know whether people are going to accept me and whether they're going to let me belong, because I don't really know where I am, and I'm not really certain. And is this enough? Am I enough? That's the kind of underlying essence when I look at this chart.
Great. So I'm a paradox. I literally am searching for belonging in tribe, but every place that I am open influences me in the opposite direction of where ultimately I want to go.
Not really what I'm saying. So you're looking for a place in the tribe, but life experience will have said that you never know when enough is enough. You don't really know what direction you're going in, and you feel quite uncertain. So you're going to naturally suppress all of your clarity. If you think of your manifestedness as clarity and not certainty, and the expression of that clarity. So you will have probably learned in the past that you have expressed your clarity and it has threatened your place in the tribe. Instead of thinking, oh, that tribe's not for me, you go into, oh, I don't really know where I belong then. And I'm never really sure. And is this enough? Am I enough? Not am I enough from an ego perspective, just is this enough effort? Am I efforting enough through this? Which will naturally pull down your manifestor tendencies. The thing that I look for in manifestors is all of the reasons their life will have given them not to manifest. That's not true for generators or projectors or reflectors. That's not how I read their charts. Manifestors, the common theme is they are no longer manifesting. And they are no longer manifesting because they will have tried to manifest and life will have taught them that it's not safe for whatever reason. And you can always see that in the rest of the design. So your life history will have been, you manifest, you initiate, and it's not enough. It's, it doesn't allow you to fit within the tribe if you say stuff like that, or you manifest like that, or you initiate like that. So you will stop manifesting because it threatens your place in the whole, because it's something that you really need.
So how do I remedy all of those years of conditioning?
So this is why I don't just do human design, because remedying years of conditioning is why we're coaches. That's part of that. The real key, if you were just going to design this, like human design it, is keep initiating, keep commenting, keep speaking, keep saying, keep doing, keep trying, because eventually you will find your place in the whole. And that truth of keep going, keep doing, keep trying is manifestor gold, because you will make people uncomfortable. You will make everyone uncomfortable at some time. But that doesn't necessarily mean, doesn't ever mean anything about you. It says everything about the other people. So keep trying, inform first. So the overshare element. So if you're about to say something publicly, it's like you almost share where it came from so people have context. That's the informing. So if you're about to, I don't know, put a post on Instagram, you literally say, I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and that preface sentence makes us all feel safe because we know where it came from. It's not just the end paragraph of wisdom. It's an informing that gives us a fuller context. And the more context a manifestor can give for what they're about to do, the safer everyone around them feels. So like in relationships, it's like just saying something that's the end thought of a paragraph of thought is very unsafe for generators on the other side of it, or for anyone on the other side of it, because we're like, hang on, you just completely upended my understanding of what's happening because you've just given me the last sentence of your narrative. It's like the person that I messaged on Instagram the other day booked a holiday to Florida, and like that was how she told her husband that they were going to go to Florida. It's like, inform. Honey, I'm thinking of maybe having having a break in the sun, like might have helped, because informing about the process helps. And that's the whole thing. And you're doing that for other people, not for you. Trust me, manifestors, it's really boring. You are making us all feel safer though. So in our like professional world, I've said this to you multiple times, it makes me feel safe if you tell me the process of what you're doing rather than just go off and do things on your own. Now, this is where I want to bring in your profile, because profile will influence manifestors. Well, it influences every type, but it will also show you as a manifestor who you are supposed to be influencing and who you are supposed to be informing. It will also show you how you do it. So profile, this is a reason why I went into the hexagrams and the lines earlier on. Profile is the little numbers to the side of the bigger numbers in your chart. These are the lines, and profile is read from the top two planets on both sides. They're the same number, and it doesn't really make any difference why, but essentially the sun and the earth are always the same number because they're opposite each other in the wheel. So they're always the same number. So you read the personality first. Everything we do in design is right to left because we read conscious and then unconscious. So personality, black, unconscious, design, red. And so you are a 1-4. Now, there are 12 different varieties of number matching, because there's 6. Doesn't matter. It's a geometry thing. So 1-4s the first line, as I said earlier, is very investigative. It's very foundational. It's like trying to understand the details of how this archetype is built. So it's digging into the foundations. A first line is very associated with fear, but not fear in a negative way. Fear in a, we need to have this all right before we actually externalize it, because if we don't have all our ducks lined up in a row, i.e. if the foundations aren't built correctly, the house will crumble. So first lines are all about getting the foundations correct before externalizing. The fourth line is all about externalizing to the network. This is not externalizing, like jumping up on a lecture stage and telling everyone about it. It is not telling everyone what to do. And that's a common theme for manifestors. They fall into telling people what to do when they know about informing, because they think, oh, I just need to inform people about what to do. It's like, no, that's a very fifth line energy, telling people what to do. It's like, that's a very kind of like, fifth lines have the power to have a bit more resilience to people not wanting to listen to them. So they can tell people what to do because they don't need people to listen. Fourth lines, again, we are back on tribe and community, Grace. Everything about you is tribe and community. You are supposed to influence the people closest to you, the people around you, the people who you can actually be in room space with is who you influence. And room space also now includes social media followers, because they're literally basically in your room, as we could call it. But essentially, you know, the network, the little networking kind of like networking thing is what fours do. So the trap that this design will fall into, i.e. you will fall into, is your uncertainty principles will fuel that first line, and you will keep investigating far longer than you probably need to if you're doing it from a, I don't know enough and I'm not certain that I know what I'm doing. Or, no, and by the way, I'm hovering my, this is what I do in readings and I'm forgetting that people are listening. The I'm not certain and I don't know that I know what I'm doing is an open Ashna, open mind, like thing. So, and then you've got the not enough energy of the open sacral and don't know where I'm going, don't know the direction. I don't really know what I'm going with what I'm saying, therefore I shouldn't say it. Type of energy is the open G center in the middle. So those three I don't know themes play into your first line conscious personality profile theme of needing to investigate. So what I love giving people is places to catch themselves. So these have like literal not self strategies. So if you're investigating because you need detail, great. If you're investigating because you're trying to be absolutely certain before you externalize, you know, you're focusing on the open not self strategy of the Ashna Center. If you're investigating because you feel like if you just researched enough, you'd know the direction to go, you're using the not self strategy of the open G Center. And if you're investigating because you feel like you haven't done enough, it's the open sacral center that is influencing the investigation. So the key is self-reflection about, why am I still investigating? Am I investigating because the details need to be fleshed out? Or am I investigating because I'm feeling the pressure of my open centers? And the thing that you have is a spleen, which is a safety center. So you actually have an innate sense of safety within you that you will get to if you investigate enough. But it's about, the trick is not listening to the open centers.
Oy.
Brace hates his design, people. It's like a theme. Most manifestors do. Most manifestors find it really difficult because they found their lives really difficult and they just want someone to tell them where they belong. Like, not just you with your belonging stuff, but they just want to fit in. And manifestors literally are not built to fit in necessarily. And they've often tied themselves in knots and believed the truth of their open centers, as in, you're not trying hard enough, you're not doing enough, you're not certain enough, you don't know the direction. And if you don't know the direction, don't start on the journey. Really common for open G centers. If you don't know where you're going, don't start on the journey. It's like, well, no. Like, and that's the thing. And I say this to people with open minds all the time, because I have an open mind. It's like, I am never certain. Like, people look at me and think I'm super certain about stuff. I literally started writing our curriculum yesterday. And by the end of like an hour, I was sitting there going, I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I will rally, but my default is to fall into I'm uncertain. I never, like, we record these podcasts. Do I ever have notes, Brace? No. And it's like, do I know what I'm going to talk about when we start? No. Do we always get somewhere? Yes. But was I the person at school who literally rewrote the textbook when I was trying to revise because I was trying to get it into my brain? Yes. Did I go to every single exam thinking like I knew absolutely nothing? Yes. Common theme of the open head center. And the trick for open head centers is, sorry, Ajna, the head is the top one. We haven't really spoken about it today. It's inspiration and openness to cosmos stuff. When it's open, you can be open to lots of things. But the trick for the Ajna is to stop reaching certainty as the determinant of future action, particularly for a manifesto. Like, action is not, for you, action is not dependent on mental certainty, knowing the direction you're going energetically and feeling like you've got the energy to do it. For you, initiation, action is based on, is your intuition saying it? And has it been saying it for a while whilst you've been emotional about it?
Okay, so for me specifically, because and I love that you've really gone into those three open areas, because those are very, very strong motivators in how I make decisions and how I have previously moved through my life, because they invoke a very strong sense of fear, my one, within me. Also, and that fear is always
there. Yeah.
That fear is always stronger to me than the knowing side of me, because I always second guess the knowing side.
And I love that you said that,
like, because that's not real.
Yeah, because you magnify the energy in the upper centers. It's why they're so attractive, and it's why they're so like damaging, because you magnify this energy. It's always other people's. And the spleen is super quiet. The spleen is instinct, gut instinct awareness, that intuition, spidey senses, all splenic, but really quiet. And they only say it once. And if you miss it, you have to like walk away and come back. And I know this because, like, I use my examples that I'm a splenic generator. I have no emotional process. Everything I do is in the moment. Like my shampoo example, if I second guess that spleen, if I'm like, really, that shampoo today? I need to almost turn my head physiologically away from the shampoos to kind of clean slate it and look back at them to get the second read, because I can't just keep looking, because the spleen only says it once unless you reset the clock. Same with my tonic waters in the fridge. If I'm going to, the fridge to pick a kombucha or whatever I've got, if I second guess my first instinct and impulse, I have to shut the fridge and walk away and then go back and go, okay, no, it was that one. And it's always the first one, even though I've second guessed it. So for you, the splenic intuition, it's not about second guessing it when you're waiting. It's about validating it and going, do I feel safe, spleen, to share this at any emotional time, really, realistically? So there will be a time lapse for you, but it's not a time lapse where you fall into doubt. It's a time lapse where you just go, I know that's right, but do I want to share it? Does that make sense?
I know that it's right, but do I want to share it? So I have to wait for my emotional wave to complete before I know 100% should I share it or not?
Yes. And when you think about all of this, it's like, there's a time and a place for waiting out emotional waves, and there's a time and a place for not. And I'm a very big advocate of like throwing out some of the rules when they don't apply. Take my dinner example. I'm going to be eating this in the time when I'm literally in this. So big stuff, absolutely ride out the emotional wave. The thing about the emotional wave is I've lived around emotional people, and I was making a joke about my mum earlier. And there are times when she is on a low end of her wave, and she knows it now. And we will have that conversation. I'm just low on my wave because everything irritates her. Everything is just like, and for all of the emotional waves have a different kind of energy to them. And mum's is the 35, 36 around the edge. It's very ratchet snap. So when she is in an emotional state, she's very testy. She's very on the edge of like snapping. And so there will be days where we just don't have conversation. She'll be like, we're just talking past each other today, and I'm so irritated with you. She's not irritated with me. It's just like, she's got that energy around her. But it's valuable. This is the thing about emotional people that I don't think is stressed enough. Your emotional wave, particularly through the 4037, it's almost like evaluating whether this is healthy for the tribe energetically through the emotionality of the tribe. So when you're thinking about, do I want to share it? If it matters to you and it's instant that it matters, if it's like, are we going to go to this restaurant or this restaurant? And you really want to go to that restaurant and it's time and contextual and you know it's right to go to that restaurant, you don't need to wait out an emotional wave. You say we're going to that restaurant because it's now that the decision needs to be made. But for bigger things like, you know, do I want to, I don't know, like join a gym? Like, it's not, I need to join a gym. It's like, oh, I really feel the instinct that gym is the right one. Just gonna like wait on it a little bit because it's financial commitment, it's a time commitment, it's all those sorts of things. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah.
What I love about all of this,
Brace
is now processing. We should probably not. Oh, my mum's going to hate me for having said that word like that as well. This is what we didn't think about doing Brace's charts. Like, I have never actually done this for Brace, particularly talked about the open centers. So
yeah, that was super helpful. So helpful because, and I'm probably just going to reiterate, but I think it bears being said. I'm going to inform that I'm going to say it again, that the fear that crops up is so powerful and has influenced so many of my decisions. And now that I know and am aware about those, and I'm so familiar with them, but it's never been explained to me in this way that when they do pop up, I can pause now in those moments and be like, hey, where is that coming from? Where is that fear coming from? Is it coming from the fact that I feel like I need to know absolutely everything? Is it coming from the fact that I feel like if, and help me with the drive, the center there.
The sacral center. Or this one? Which one? Which center?
The top one, the one in the middle.
That one.
Sorry.
Yes. So the drive and motivation. So that's about knowing where you're going. It's like you're never going to set out on a journey knowing where you're going. So almost like if you're writing a blog post, you're going to start and work out where you're going as you go along. And those sorts of things. The tendency with this chart will be to overplan and suffocate this communication because you're just trying to get all the details in line before you feel like you want to externalize.
Got it. And then the sacral?
Not enough. I haven't done enough. It's all about never knowing when enough is enough. And the thing for me as well is like, this sounds really detailed. We probably lost all of our listeners a while ago. But there's so much more details. If you're on YouTube now, you'll see me shift images. So this is a whole nother layer of analysis that we could look at. We're not going to today because it will confuse the life out of everyone. I also read gene keys from Human Design charts. I can pull up charts separately, but all of the gene key stuff is in here. So the activation sequence is the personality Sun, Earth, and the design Sun, Earth. The wound sequence of the Venus sequence is the moon and then falling into your Venuses and Marses down here. And actually Jupiter, but Jupiter's where the pearl lives. There's Saturn sequences. So there's so much more. And then you can look at activations where you get to understand a bit more of a deeper theme. So Brace has 7 fourth line activations. Having 7 fourth line activations is very dominant. It's quite a lot. And you've got 6 first lines. Interesting thing about the hexagram is that these lines are harmonic in nature. So if there's 6 of them, the 1 and the 4 resonate, the 2 and the 5 resonate, and the 3 and the 6 resonate. If you have lots of 4s and lots of 1s, this is literally networking, fourth line, so opportunities within the network, and fear, first line foundational fear, investigate. So there's a lot of investigate to understand where I fit. There's a lot of need to understand the opportunity before I take it. There's that dynamic going on all the time in this chart, and they're in very prominent positions. So if you're on YouTube, you can see this program's great because it highlights where all the ones are. So Brace's ones are in his personality, Sun, Earth, and Moon, and Mars, and his design nodes. And the design nodes are all about the environment, literally physical environment that you live in, quite a lot of health stuff. So 22 is all about grace, and it's all about honor and dishonor. That's kind of the theme for your first half of your life. And then 47 is all about oppression, and not oppression in a negative way, just where is the pressure coming from, particularly mentally. So that's the themes that you live. And then, I mean, honestly, we can do link nodes, we can do life journeys. It's crazy the amount we can do. But if you look at where your fourth lines are, they're a bit more outer planets, but they are your design sun. So lots of ones in lots of very high up prominent places means lots of fear, lots of needing to investigate. And for you, literally is about watching where those investigation impulses come from, because everything that's correct is an impulse for you, because that's very splenic. You just wait to make sure you're emotionally in the right state to share is probably the best way to say that, actually. Are you emotionally in the right state to share that impulse right now? Mm-hmm. And so the impulses are very accurate. It's all of the not self-centers, the fear that are people going to understand, are people going to believe me, are people going to, want to hear what I have to say, all of those open center doubts, which infiltrate everything else.
Oh, that makes sense.
Told you, human design charts tend to be resonant when you give them to them. Manifestos are always angry when I give
which is my not self theme.
Right. Manifestors have a right to be angry, because literally the world isn't built for them, and they will have had the manifesto beaten out of them from a very early age. So, yeah. And just to speak to the not self theme, the theme is anger because people don't understand them. It's anger because you're trying to do something, but people aren't getting it. And typically they're not getting it because we don't understand where the hell it came from, because the informing wasn't there. And it just feels very brusque to us. And then your theme of anger being unresolved love, it's in this energy somewhere. It's like, but I'm trying my best. Why are you not listening to me? Or like, but I really meant it well, or all of that kind of stuff that comes off the back of not having people allow you to do your thing leads to anger. Generator, not self-theme, is frustration, by the way. And frustration tends to come for generators when there's nothing to respond to. I find emptiness quite destabilizing as a generator, because it's like, I don't know what to do now because there's nothing to respond.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you. Clearly aggravated you that much. Irritated you. Yes. So, and there's so much more. Like, there's the fact that Brace is a split definition. Therefore, the person that will be most important to Brace is anybody who bridges his splits, people, should I say. So 21s, 44s, and 12s, and 41s all will bridge Brace's splits, which means that they will create links. So his emotionality and his splenic intuition and manifestness can come together. So looking in your life to find those people will be quite interesting, particularly if they just have those gates. So I've got the 4426, which means I will dominate that channel over you, but I will link you up. I don't have any of the others. So interesting.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, so, man. Well, yeah, it's fascinating. And I know that there's so much more, and it's so involved and just fascinating. The deeper that you get into it, like some of the details that Victoria has talked about, just like going back to like food, there's colors, and like, do the colors, they have something to do with taste?
Yeah. So
and like how you process like food and sustenance and things.
So each hexagram, each line has 6 colors, 6 tones, and 5 bases. So there's many layers beneath the line, which further subdivides that wheel that we were talking about earlier. So there's more and more subdivisions. And what essentially happens is that the more accurate your time of birth, the more accurate you can be about those subtle underlying energies. And so the color and tone combine to give you basically a preferential way of taking things in. So on the design side, it's taking nutrition into your body. And on the personality side, it's about taking information in. So you can read it as a general level of like just a thematic of whether it's very structured and rigid and logical, or whether it's kind of abstract and open, or you can get very granular and specific and understand that your specific color is swung in a specific direction, which means you should eat in a certain way, or you should take information in a certain way, or see the world in a certain way, because the nodes are all to do with environment. So we can read deeper levels of where the environment that you might feel safest and more nourished in, and also your perspective on the world. And it gets very fascinating, and you can find more and more and more themes. And then particularly if you tie the lines of the Venus sequence in as well, so people are understanding their trigger patterns and their wounding and how they by default. And if you can tie wounding, so Brace's wounding is disconnection. It's the 6th line. So it's very much about like literally just pulling back and going, can't. And that will be what Brace does when he's overwhelmed by all that. Oh, I don't know enough. Maybe I'm not certain enough. Maybe I'm all of those open centers that we talked about. I don't know where I'm going. Instead of like sticking with it and keeping trying, your default will be, oh, I'm just not. It would just be to disconnect. Yeah. As a default. I'm completely the opposite. If I find myself pulling into my open centers, which is I don't feel safe emotionally, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I think, I'm not certain, all that kind of stuff. Like with the curriculum writing yesterday, I will dig in. I'm a first line wound, so I will very much repress how I'm feeling and dig in and try harder. So it's a complete opposite approach. And this is the beauty of having all of this knowledge in my world. It's like seeing people's patterns and making it really abstract. Because if I can point to your design that's a black and white thing that is, created on the moment that you're born, none of those things are your fault. None of those are not enough narratives of your faults. None of those, I don't know the direction I'm going in is true. It just is part of your design, and it abstractifies, if that's a word, the whole thing. And what we've said before in our shame podcast, and what I say regularly to my clients, is like, this is what allows me to say to you, that's really normal and it's not a problem. It's just awareness. Awareness is the key to everything.
Yeah, this is huge. And for everyone listening, this is a kind of a brief overview of a deep dive in what you can learn about yourself and how to most efficiently move through the world, and also understand why certain quote unquote roadblocks have been there that aren't necessarily even real. It's just kind of a figment of our imagination. And when you book a deep dive with Victoria, she can take you through those things. And it's like the clouds part and the sun starts coming through, and you have a little bit more compassion and understanding for yourself and how you've been. It's almost freeing. Like,
yeah. And
to understand.
And to be clear, like within a deep dive, I don't do all of the, and these are all the other types unless it's sort of relevant. And I go into, so the subtle shift in the planets that I made with one of the views that I shared towards the end of that is actually looking at magic square. And magic square is what allows us to see the color tone line. And if we have an accurate time of birth, I will go into your personalized primary health system, like way of eating food and taking nourishment in and environment, and your psychological way of taking information in, seeing the world. Psychology is fascinating because it's about psychological motivation. I love looking at people's psychology. I don't know that we've done yours, actually. We did your food stuff, but like psychological motivation, it literally colors, which is why they're called colors, everything about the way you do things. So my psychological motivation is to do with hope. And mine is skewed specifically to anti-theist. And so hope is all about trust and like hope. Literally, the word hope is all to do with just that belief in a bigger thing, or like just hoping. It's not about probability that this may or may not happen. It's possibility, what might happen. But the two switches are theist and anti-theist. So hope from a theist perspective is anything might happen because I believe in God or the universe or whatever. Hope from an anti-theist perspective, from where I sit, it's like it really doesn't matter what I believe. Like that, I'm not against believing. In fact, I'm a very big proponent in the power of having a belief principle. I just don't really find belief to be the underlying foundation of the hope that I have. I'm very, what's going to happen?
Oh, that could potentially be very a sigh of relief for a lot of people who are like, I don't know why I don't feel and think this way I'm supposed to. And it's like,
Oh,
maybe
completely.
not. Yeah.
Right. And for me, the whole thing about hope is like, watch what happens, like just sit by the river. And so I'm kind of feeling it at the moment. It's like we've launched our course and it's like I should be like anxious about, is it going to be filled? Is it going to, I'm trying to do that. And part of me is doing that. But the other part of me is like just really trusting and going, let's see what's going to happen. And hope is a lot about sitting by the river. Let me just check your chart so we can give a bit of alternative feedback so I can talk about yours, see if it resonates with you. So you're a 6th color and you're a 3rd tone, which will skew it left. I'm not going to explain that because it's way too complicated. So 6th color is all about observer observed. It's literally innocence, but it's 6th color is very to do with the 6th line of disconnection in the wounding. It's like you're not really in the movie. You're either watching it or you're being watched, but it's kind of that sense of your motivation is towards whether you are going to be seen or not, or whether it will be seen or not, etc. So for you, it's about being observed. So a lot of the thing that will play into your fear and your thinking is, will people see this? People are watching. Who's watching? And that will dominate your thinking. It's like, who's watching? Who's going to see this? Will be a big theme underneath those fears that come up.
That definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I don't like exposing myself without knowing everything, because if someone sees that I have a weakness, they'll see the weakness.
Yeah.
And they'll focus on that, and then they'll throw me away.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I have moved through life.
Yeah.
And that's kind of sad now that I think about it. It's like, man, what a sad way of being.
Yeah.
It's like, do you really want to be with a person who's going to throw you away because of one chink in the chainmail? It's like, you're not going into battle. It's like you're trying to better yourself.
Right.
That makes me sad for me.
It's funny as well. Like I would love to like type industries. Like I'd love to just go into the theater industry and see how many of these people are 6s. Like they need to be watched. Like they need people to see them, but also they don't want to be seen really. So they're hiding themselves by playing a character. It's like, how many of them are 6s? Like that would just be interesting to me.
Yes.
And, you know, on the other side, so on the design side, you can look at people's dominant sense. And there's a lot of misinformation about this out there. The sense is not the color, it's the tone. And everyone's talking about the sense like it's the color. That's not really true. So your tone is your dominant sense. So mine is to do with, oh God, I've forgotten. Oh, wow. I think it's the 5th sense. I can't remember, so I won't tell people. But it is literally smell, taste, touch. That's not the right order. Smell, taste, inner vision, outer vision, touch, and then sound, or sound then light. No, sound then light. Yeah, I got it right. So frequency is really important to me. I am a 5th color. I'm 5th tone. I've just remembered. Frequency is really important to me. It's like I'm like, you've seen me, you watch me. I'm super sound sensitive. And part of that's my hypervigilance of like just my nervous system being dysregulated, but I'm super sound sensitive. And part of it's my musician training. So you can't play music around me without me tuning into it because my musical brain is logging onto it. But then why was I a musician? So, and you know, I don't necessarily do my music now because I'm really sensitive to how rubbish it is compared to what it used to be. It's just this sound sensitivity, but frequency is super important to me. So we were doing some stuff the other day in one of the trainings that I'm doing at the moment, and we were talking about stabilization exercises. And there's different ways to stabilize somatically. And I was just listening to the training, and you know, I'm not really a touch person. Like it's not my dominant sense, although it could be. I'm kind of in the same brackets, but I wasn't instantly drawn to like touch as being the thing. I'm much happier for people to like talk to me and stabilize me with the quality of their voice rather than anything else. And so I was just like, do we resonate with the stabilization technique which matches our dominant sense? No idea. And you can't tell because so many people are not self. So you can't actually do the study because it's not accurate.
Very interesting.
mind-blowing. The whole thing. It's like every time I come back to this, and I did, like I said, I did a reading for our colleague on Saturday, which was great. I'm doing one for another colleague on Thursday. And every time I come back to it, I'm like, there's so much here. There's so much here. And to be really clear, when you study with the Unveil Academy, you will not be able to do this at the end of 4 lessons of training. I'm good, but I'm not that good. Like, what I will mainly be doing is teaching you the literal facts of what is there, like going into each of the centers and each of the types and each of the profiles. And each of the authorities. So Brace's authority is emotional, because everyone who's got a solar plexus defined has to be emotional, because it's kind of like the dominant thing. You have to ride out that wave. But there are other authorities. So I will be giving all of that information. And I will also be doing each type from the perspective of, okay, so how should you coach if you're this type? How should you coach if you're this? And then we've got 3 masterclasses and 3 Q&As where people are going to have the opportunity to just ask me tons of questions, so that their specific stuff, I can help them directly.
That's amazing.
And that's just 1 month of 11 months of training. You can do that pillar separately, by the way, if anyone wants to do that as a standalone pillar.
That's true. I have one more question. Mm-hmm. And this has to do with something that we've talked about, but I haven't fully understood it. So you said that there's a 7-year
deconditioning cycle. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Could you explain that? Because I'm still interested, because like you kind of did my first reading, like a year 2 years ago?
Oh, a year. We've only known each other a year and a month.
Really?
Year and 2 months. Yeah.
Man, my time is all crazy.
/ I'm like that indelibly imprinted on your life that you're just like, I've known her for ages.
For ages, yeah.
So yes, I did your first reading like just over a year ago. Technically you have to be in the experiment, but with Manifestos that's pretty tricky to actually understand. Am I informing? Am I not informing? So essentially the 7-year deconditioning cycle is because after 7 years you are a completely different cellular human than you were 7 years previously. And effectively, what you're trying to do, and I don't know that the cellular explanation feels accurate, but as you've just explained, your default is literally to live as a generator that's not very effective and that lectures itself 24/7 about not being the things that you want to be.
Right.
That's common for everyone. We all get the resonant truth of our design and we're like, oh my God, I recognize that. That's so clear. And now I have to live a life where I just have to respond. Okay, for myself, like respond. And it's like, how do I not initiate? How do I wait? How do I? So the practice of doing that is after 3.5 years, it becomes more often than not that you are doing things according to your strategy and authority. After 7 years, it becomes the default. And that's the whole process. And people try to short circuit it. People are out there being practicing human design professionals who've done several years of study, which is great, but still aren't deconditioned. So I'm like, how can you actually be doing that when you're like, not, anyway, it's one of my many frustrations with the human design world. But ultimately, and to be super clear, you don't need human design to have found a way to live in this life where you've deconditioned. Quite a lot of people that I meet in the coaching space have gone some way to getting rid of some of their conditioning influences. Conditioning influences from a human design perspective means people who have colored in your open centers that then make you think you need to behave in that way. So quite a lot of people that I've met, especially people who've either been in a different system, so done a lot of astrological work, because they're dealing with the same themes and the planets are in the same place, like they've done a lot of contemplation on the same energies, even if they've done it from a zodiacal perspective. I don't think zodiacal is a word, but anyway, from a zodiac perspective, because the themes
so
of the
zodiacal.
Sorry guys, I've been speaking for a long time now, but the themes of the signs are linked to the themes of the I Ching. They're not separate. People try to talk to me about zodiac signs all the time, and I'm like, oh yeah. People say I'm a classic Gemini. I'm like, good for you. Means it's not my language. I mean, I know what classic Gemini means. I know what they're trying to say now, but it was never my language. But people who've done a lot of thinking in those ways and have done a lot of like self-investigation, especially people who've done a lot of like intentional overthrowing of the influences that they've had in their lives, because they'll just, like, you can relate it to someone. So sometimes people don't want to do human design when they work with me. That's fine. Do I run their chart? Sometimes not. Sometimes it's not right to. Am I still helping them decondition? Absolutely, because we can talk about this in themes. So if we were just talking about your parents and your upbringing and your place in your family, we could have a very similar conversation to what we had today, but thematically, and we talk about it from the energetic perspective of your lived experience. Your lived experience tracks to your design. So we can talk about it from the design perspective, which I think is super valuable, because you can go bottom up, but you can still talk about it from top down perspective and talk about the lived experience and get to a place where you feel more inner comfort, particularly somatic comfort. And what you're actually doing is orienting yourself back towards your design. And the other thing about human design, if you look at it, it's like, and we said this in our human design solo like podcast thing, where it was all about general human design. It's so simple at its essence, because beneath any of the specifics, every single type is told, make decisions with your body and not your mind, which is literal ancient philosophy. It's every single kind of, spiritual wisdom tries to orient authority back into the human organism as a whole, not thinking from this cognitive machine, which is, sense making, but also nonsense making. The whole thing about the mind is it's the only thing with the mind and the concepts. We can time travel with our mind, but our body can't time travel. It's the only thing that's actually here in this whole entire moment. So using our whole organism to interface with the world around us is the right thing to do. So a lot of people who've done a lot of that work and a lot of centering back on the entirety of the holistic human have tended to migrate closer and closer and closer towards living from what would be their design, because they just put their authority back in their body. And this is instinctive. I've cognitively explained 2 concepts today that you could have got to by just being in your body long enough. You'll have felt this instinct impulse. And a lot of the physical things that I will have described, you will have felt. Those moments at my fridge or in my shower, they're physical. And all this does is take authority away from the brain. So all of this to say, there are a lot of people who are very close to living their design. And adding design into the mix is the biggest aha to them. Like, I did 10 minutes of telling my coach about his human design, and he was like, because it just made so much sense. And for him, it was very much this system is actually accurate, not I need to go away and change my entire behavior pattern based on it. And sometimes those are the reasons that I give. Yeah.
That's huge. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what I love doing, because like, he's been in the work for decades and done tons of stuff, has a big background in astrology. This is not his landscape, but it makes sense to him when I explain it, which I love, because it kind of validates the system. Because it's crazy when you think of this dude went into a cave in Ibiza and came out like 8 days later with all of this laid out, like all of it, the whole Ray by Ching, the charts, the strategies, the colors, type, tones, bases, stuff that he never even taught because he thought it was too deep, all of it. And you're just like, but I have never met a system where it's not like astrology, where it's been kind of devalued into being too thematic. So no one validates their horoscopes, because you're like, how can everyone born in this kind of month space have the same thing? And it's true, because true astrology, you're looking at, rising signs and planetary placement and houses and all that kind of stuff.
Lots of details. Yeah.
Right. But even then, with human design, there's so much more detail to it. There's so much more analysis potential. And that's the criticism of it. It's really scientific. You saw that program if you were watching on YouTube. It's called Maya Mechanics. They call it the mechanics of human design. And it's mechanical. It's scientific in nature, even though it's very esoteric in origin. It's very scientific in structure and form. It's why my brain works in it, because my brain works in systems. But that's where the gene keys came from, as she says, demonstrating the Gene Keys book, because Gene Keys is very energetic as a transmission, as we said in our Gene Keys episode that we did. And it takes those archetypes. And so it's not quite accurate, but you can look at it visibly. This is the Ray Ching. this is the Gene Keys book. That's the difference in thickness. So anyone watching on YouTube can, and this isn't actually the way of watching, this is a circuitry book, but this does talk about every single gate and channel. This is just a contemplation on the energy of the archetypes. And it's fascinating. And this is what I'm doing summer school on. So if you were at all intrigued by today, summer school, we will,
Yes.
if you register for our coach training course by August 1st, you can come on summer school with me. And I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do yet. And actually, if not very many people are on, because registration is not high before August, I will just do individual Gene Keys readings and we'll dig into everyone's personal sequences. But my theory at this moment in time is I want to talk about a few of the really key archetypes, the 22, the 55. I want to talk about the spectrum of consciousness and what it means. I also want to do a deep contemplation on shadow frequencies and the essence of the gift being within the shadow, which is all to do with Gene Keys. And you'll literally hear that my entire language has just changed from lines and tones and colors and faces and structure and channels and gates and specific science to shadows and gifts and spiritual, magical, essence-y stuff. That's the literal transition from Human Design to Gene Keys. So that's what happens. So yeah.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Because, well, and saying that, you know, the gifts are in the shadows. I mean, literally, I'm just thinking about my design, because I would consider, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, like shadows is where my fear starts to pop up. It's like, but that's where I can learn the most about myself and how I work. Like, understanding the fear, not as this thing that I want to get rid of, but understanding that it's pointing something out to me that I need to pay attention to, and knowing how to work within that actually makes fear a lot less of something that I want to get rid of, but something that I can embrace and use as a tool more than anything.
100%. And the reality of the way we did your design today is I focus very much on the not self strategies, because that's where you have been living and all that kind of stuff. But to speak about the kind of living from the gift of that, it's like, you don't need to know where you're going. You don't need to know that you're right. You don't need to know that it's enough. You just need to start. Yeah. And actually, that's very liberating. If you say it in that way.
Hugely liberating, because so many of my parts were like, wait. And then, but then there's this other whole part of me that is like, wow, you guys, all those other voices, shut up.
And I just want to double click on that. I really want to double click on that. It's not, you don't need to worry or know where you're going because you're going to make mistakes and it's going to be terrible, but it's supposed to be that way. It's like, if you don't care about where you're going, you will flow so much better. Like, it's literally not, you do not have to worry about knowing where you're going. It will be better if you don't. It's like, you don't need to be certain. It will be better if you're not. You don't need to feel like it's enough. It will be better if you feel like it's not enough. Like, and that's the magic of human design. It's like, I don't need to care about any of that. And it's like, no, what caring about it is doing is frustrating the energy. It's holding it back.
Right.
And it isn't, oh, I'm going to like just manifest and everything's going to go terribly wrong. It's like, no, hang on. No, you are a manifester who doesn't have consistent energy in any of the centers of certainty. So you'll be better if you're uncertain. Like, literally, your design says you will be better if you don't know.
That is trippy. That is so trippy.
But
in the best way, because it's like I get to let go.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I get to let go of all the stuff that I've held on to as these are the rules forever. It's like, no, they're not my rules. Maybe those rules apply to other people, but not me as a unique individual. And that's what's so cool about these human design deep dives, everyone, is like, it's unique to you, your own unique life experience. And you can, maybe I'm bold saying this, but you can really only get the depth and the layers of this if you book something with Victoria, because she's one of the few people on the planet who can do it as deep and as intensely as you are able to.
And with the blend of the two systems. And that a lot of that is just the quirk of the luck of my incarnation. Like I was lucky enough to be trained by Ra right from the beginning. I was lucky enough to live around the corner from Richard. And, you know, having those kind of influences in my life for 7 years, literally the 7 years of deconditioning, I was surrounded by the creators of these systems. That is unique. I know it's unique because I know the people who are in those communities. And it, for me, like I said on my Instagram stories over the weekend, this is the most fun I can have while technically calling it work. I think I've just looked at the time. This probably is a 2-hour podcast, Brace, and we just haven't been working. I know, right? And it's like, okay. I just want to touch back on your first line.
Okay.
First line is about investigation. It's not about being frightened about not knowing enough. So I think for you, the distinction is you need to learn the rules to not care about them. It's like learning about what's there to investigate it and then just throwing them away. You are the classic for like, watch the thing, chuck it away.
Learn the rules to throw them away.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
His wife is going to kill me. He's going to walk out of this session. He's going to go out and be to his wife like, we're doing this, babe. I'm not doing this anymore. It's like, I'm not playing by the rules anymore.
Awesome. Well, and the cool thing about it is she fills in so many of those open centers for me that she'll be like, okay, great. Well, let me know how it goes.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, she's not going to fight me on it. She'll just be like, okay, I trust it. Let's do it. And that's amazing. Victoria, such a really very cool episode, very enlightening. Even yes. As much as you've already taught me, just learning that much more just builds confidence and security and groundedness, alignment with, you know, who I am as a human being. And, you know, we always say we're always in process. And so thank you. So if someone wants to book with you, I know we've got several emails and lots of links and so on. Where would they go to book a deep dive?
Whoops. It'll be in the show notes. I can't remember. If you go to links.page/Victoria, there'll be a link in there to book a deep dive with me. Links.page/Victoria.
Do yourself a favor, book a deep dive. It will open up so much. I'm very excited
because they're going away. And if too many people book a deep dive, I'll be shutting it all down. Not because I don't want to do it, but because when I talk about this curriculum, you will hear how passionate I am about it. And it really, to me, there is a moment in my life at this moment in time where the word you were looking for before about that moment between sleep and awake is luminal space. And I am in the luminal space of my life right now. No, liminal space, not luminal, liminal. Wow, just too many words. Liminal, try again.
Liminal.
Yeah. And I'm in that space right now from moving on away from I have to do everything myself into I have to teach other people how to do it. So I absolutely know that there is this shift happening where I'm stepping back a little bit so I can train. So if you want to train with me, unveilacademy.com/launch. There's a great page up now about the overview. There's some videos of me talking about it, all the things. I've no idea when this episode's actually coming out. It may be after August the 1st, which means that if I'm going to have to put this out before August 1st now, aren't I? We're too far ahead, Bryce. Train with me. unveilacademy.com/launch.
Amazing. For now, I'm Brace Harris.
And I'm Victoria Fenton.
And we are
Unveil.
Stay informed with all things Unveil. Sign up for the newsletter at unveilenterprises.com/sign up.